Thank you all for coming to my talk, especially after lunch. The first one's toughest. Bit of a lofty title there. I'll give it more caveats later. I'm sure you would expect that. But first of all, who am I? I'm a consultant at JumpSec doing FSL simulation, red teaming. With them since 2021. I used to be a pediatrician before cyber. Maybe a story over a couple of pints. Dealt with kids before. Passionate in all things red teaming these days, especially in the cloud. We primarily do Azure because that's a lot of our clientele, they use Azure, but we delve a bit more into AWS and possibly GCP later. Acid Jazz and Math Rock are my jam. If you like those, you're a cool person. Otherwise, you're cool too. But anyway, here are my socials. If you need to want to get in touch for some reason. Though, you say, if you check the program schedule and this talk, you notice that I've secretly changed the title from, quite reliably to somewhat reliably. But, it's just a little joke. Hopefully I piqued your interest in a bit of a clickbaity title. I strongly feel that M365 initial access is an under-discussed topic in our community. Hopefully, if you're in an offensive role, you've learned something new, want to try something out. If you're in the blue team or sysadmin or CISO even, you've given some thoughts into how to secure your Microsoft 365 identities after the talk. Right. Though we must ask why, though, as it's in many things in life, it's the most and most important question, as well as the first one to ask. Historically, Outlook accounts were mere mailboxes. It was valuable. Business email compromise was no joke, but it was not the linchpin or the crown jewel of the sorts in the, on-prem AD stuff, which might be your domain controller, your domain admins, or your critical file servers and the like, right? Yeah, they were, or even in many cases these days still are. But anyway, how about in 2024? Most organizations that we see has been hybrid, or, your startups or your fintech are actually mostly cloud native these days. So the Microsoft 365 accounts, should they use, Microsoft, bless them, would be the key to their business applications. For example, SharePoint would, M365 grants access to SharePoint, which means granting access to data access to the attacker, much like a SMB file server. Teams access would mean, sensitive chat logs, in addition to the emails that you get from Outlook. And of course, if there's a development or application heavy environment, you would use or see administrative accounts that grants access to like key vaults or sort of storage blobs or the applications and the like. DevOps pipeline compromise could, lead to your main application being, compromised to an attacker. And I've added, I've given this talk in Cardiff before. Since then, I've been doing a Azure Cloud Native Red Team, so I've added the OAuth integration in as last point, because when you compromise the sort of Azure/M365 identity, and the organization used Azure OAuth or like M365 OAuth, single sign-on integration for sort of SaaS application. For example, an IT service management platform, you could literally move into that platform and utilize that platform with the identity. So it's quite critical. So, yep. Let's give it more context, right? If you're not convinced yet that M365 is quite important these days. Imagine, you have a user's M365 identity compromised somehow. Right. So any SharePoint that the user could read and write, if they incidentally host some sort of critical business data and you have no disaster or a recovery plan or backup, then the attacker, the ransomware group, can essentially, ransomware your organization from the web portal with a delete button, if you have no backup. But of course, there's a bit of caveat that Microsoft can actually, they host a secret, quote-unquote secret backup that they could spin it back for you, but not for individual, SharePoint sites, but for your entire org. And there's a lot of pain to deal with Microsoft. So there's actually definitely disruption there. And also from some very nice chaps I've been talking to before the talk. You could actually host your malware on SharePoint and change, sort of like a document that everyone sees or uses every day. You add a bit of juicy malware in there, and you share the whole department essentially. So would Lockbit? Oh, okay, they have been busted since the first talk. But insert ransomware group, right? Would they care that the ransomware is low tech because it's just a delete button? No, they'll say, okay, I get paid easier. Good, it's good for me, right? So it's tough, One of our cloud tenants within my team is that we think of our cloud identities of our clients as endpoint devices, right? The bad guy sees identities like entry points into the cloud environment. When you have compromised an identity, they could literally move through all the M365 apps, through Azure, through SaaS, there are a lot of things that tied into that one login. So food for thought after the talk might be, are you protecting and monitoring your critical identities well enough, right? So how do I hack into it though, right? Being a consultant myself, I get asked this by my client a whole lot, like, we're on Microsoft, we're on Azure, so we should be good. They have the best engineering teams out there, best engineers, right? I promise I'll get back to this point at some point during the talk, because after all, it's why you're here anyway. But before we go into Microsoft themselves, we have to cover social engineering first. To get into a cloud, sort of tenant, you steal a post-MFA token through some sort of man-in-the-middle phishing, which is commonly done these days. For example, EvilJinx is a well-known tool that does that. We use that on engagements as well. Traditionally, threat actors or red teams use email-based delivery, but email filters are getting more, sophisticated these days. It's harder to get through, get past. You still can do it, but it's a lot of work. More threat actors have been using, teams-based phishing, because if you allow external tenant, then the user could be could be getting unsolicited messages from a red team or other sort of productivity apps that that supports instant messaging. Right. So if you're not too familiar with what man-in-the-middle phishing is like, it's essentially a transparent reverse proxy that sits between the user and their Microsoft login. The users goes through your server to complete their sign in, and the attacker would capture their password, user credentials, and they complete the MFA flow through your transparent proxy. So to Microsoft, blurring Google is a bit of fun when preparing the slide. So either Microsoft or Google, they would see the reverse proxy server's IP completing the login, and give the cookies to the reverse proxy server, but the user would get a valid login session as well. But then as an attacker, you steal that session and do stuff with it, right? So as said in prior slide, you could deliver some sort of man-in-the-middle phishing link through MS Teams, which is sort of what we blame Microsoft a lot, having vulnerable default setting. For example, like external tenants being allowed by default, right? You have to specifically go through a admin portal to disable that. Okay, fine, right? When the user gets the external tenant message, they would need to click unblock, so that's good. But another method would be to call the user directly through Teams, and that's still possible as of last month, right? So Teams as of yet don't have a native way to filter out phishing links like a lot of email clients would. So shout out to our own research that Jumpsec did. Max Corbridge, my very good friend and colleague, said in this article, like, organizations that use Microsoft Teams inherit the default configuration that allows users from outside their org to reach out to their staff members, basically. So, yep. But then, okay, social engineering is a lot of work. I'm an introvert. I don't like to talk to people. What if I could get through, naturally without, setting up pretext and all that, troublesome stuff, right? So, this is the point we get back to Microsoft. So, it's a new-ish research now, or like a report now. You can say it's the Midnight Blizzard guidance for, responsible for nation-state attack. Basically, Microsoft themselves got popped, late 2023. And, by, a threat group called, Midnight Blizzard, tied to a certain, nation-state, right? But how did they get through though? Did they do it through a, 0-day they bought from a dark web, or some like fancy, spear phishing, that took, months to prepare? After all, it's Microsoft that, we're talking about. They have the best engineers, don't they? Turns out it's a technique as well as cybersecurity itself, password spraying. So besides roasting Microsoft, which I'm sure like, I'm sorry that I know they're a sponsor that many of us would enjoy. Apologies. The interesting part is, in here, the, initial access through password spray, okay. Accounts that do not have MFA enabled, okay, fair enough. But using a low number of attempts to evade detection, that's the interesting bit. And the most interesting bit would be to use distributed, proxy infrastructure, residential proxy infrastructure, no less, to get through that. So, there is some sort of fancy tech after all, right? So to further build credibility, our own red team has been using a similar approach, since 2023, and we've gained access to a very sophisticated client in the financial sector as well. So, I need to talk about what a password spray is before going into details on how, right? It is very light on passwords. You don't try like hundreds of thousands of passwords like you do on a password crack, for example, but it's relatively heavy on users, at least hundreds, right? In our own engagements as well, at least. I won't go into details on how to use OSINT to collect, valid data, user emails. There are plenty of sort of, tutorials out there as to how to do it, but let's say we are successful in gathering, like a couple of hundreds of emails that we found to be valid somehow, right? So if you go down deeper into the science of password spraying, is a statistical attack that one of the hundreds of users' password is, welcome at 2024, spraying at 2024, welcome at 2024, exclamation mark, noted capitalization as well. I don't know why people love using season and year and welcome as part of the password. I guess it's speaks to parts of our human nature, I guess. You'd like to be welcome, or why add, or, exclamation mark is so sort of, popular. When I try to set up my broadband phone password over the phone, I said to the person, I like it to be pipe character, capital N9-H $, be, capital W1 \, and, the salesperson thought I was insane. So I'm sure you get the idea, right? So, what is the theory behind is that a quote unquote complex password that gets past complexity requirement doesn't mean it's good. A good password is an unguessable one to an attacker, right? Or a statistically, a very uncommon one. And if it has high entropy, the better, right? But if you're a sysadmin, unfortunately, users gonna user. So this heart, symbol on the slide, I give to the sysadmin in the audience. They all deserve more of our love. Maybe passkey is the answer. I've talked to some very nice chap over lunch today. 90% of his users in his organization uses passkey. So we're gonna run into some trouble if we try to red team their organization. So I guess, but it's hard to implement for a lot of other organizations as well. So the base message is that statistics are on the attacker side if you have hundreds or more users. But wait, what about, multi-factor? Aren't that supposed to stop, password spraying? Turns out that, implementing, in the past before, going deep into, this technique, I thought, MFA is supposed to stop this as well. At worst, you're just going to alert the blue team that somebody's attacking them. Or at best, you're trying to prove that MFA is working as intended to protect people with weak passwords. So turns out implementing MFA in Microsoft 365 is not as simple as flipping a switch. There are a number of reasons why certain accounts don't have MFA, right? Service accounts that does not support MFA usage, or maybe even worse, on-prem service account that's synced to the cloud for some reason. A new starter signed up today on your red team assessment who has no company phone yet, right? Or a leaver account from 2018, back from the time when, MFA wasn't a thing, yet, right, in their organization. Even if some sort of conditional access policy is being applied to that user retroactively, if that account is not disabled, if I or any, threat actor spray into that account, they could, oh, blimey, cool. I could set up my phone as the MFA device now. That's very great. So, for example, or even, legacy applications that the business need, and which does not support MFA, for example, is a CentOS 5, custom Apache server that the company that wrote that server actually, gone out of business. What are you going to do? Smack MFA on it? So, yeah. I guess you get the idea, right? So it's what it is, Swiss cheese model. We all operate in the real world. Nothing's perfect. Some imperfections generate more, adrenaline rush for the defenders and the red teamers, though. You have the users, legacy app, overworked admin, default setting, all working against your environment. So far, what we've talked about, right? To hack into M365 with some confidence, steal session token with man-in-the-middle phishing, okay, not very exciting. We most of us would know that. Weak password without MFA, okay. But why don't all the script kiddies out there run Hydra against your company's, M365 portal? There's a question, that I'm going to answer. So turns out there's a bit of last line of defense there from Microsoft called Entra ID Smart Lockout. I didn't make up the name, but it is what it is. So there's a default setting of locking a user's account after 10 failed attempts, right? So it's 10 passwords being tried on that user and fail, you'll be locked. And after each subsequent failure, the account will be locked again. And the incremental timer, interestingly, is not, disclosed to us. Good on you, Microsoft. And it also differentiates between familiar and unfamiliar, location. So if the user usually logs in from London and you're at, Cheltenham, for example, doing a red team, you locking, the user on, Entra Smart Lockout would actually just log you, but not the user. So, it's less disruption. So I guess that, is good. So at least it does what it says on the tins. It is indeed a smart lockout timer. But the interesting bit is how to get past it. But before that, what are the other, default settings? Users can self-serve. Password reset, is enabled by default. Even if I, set up a free M365 tenant, that's free for a month, right? I would get this sort of defense. But, I remember it requiring P1 or P2 license to, tweak the settings, but, even free tenants would, have it by default. And also there's some more small print, apologies if you can read that, but basically there's something called, default protections in which, Entra would analyze, IP address, signal traffic and other anonymous behavior, and give you a, IDs locked error code regardless of password validity. So basically if, you look like a bot to the Microsoft, machine learning algorithms, it will lock you and not give you a reason, even if you have a correct password. So we need to get through that as well. So that's when we get back to sort of the threat group report thing, which the threat group Midnight Blizzard, they use distributed residential proxy. Basically, they rotate their IP every request. That's why the, sort of Microsoft defenses, the default protection here doesn't see that as a password spray and lock that user immediately. For our emulation of adversaries, rather than, using it through a residential proxy, we do, AWS gateway proxying, through a tool called Fireprox. But there are other ways to implement it as well. Basically, every request, every login request that is a post request to, login.microsoftonline.com, would be proxied through, AWS API gateways, and Microsoft will see a different IP address for, each request. And you could actually, for more fun, you can change the region for every request as well. So now you're in Croatia, now you're in Brazil, now you're in Vietnam. So, and so on and so forth. And that is to how, we can get past, IP and location check, through heuristics. At least, as of yet in mid-2024. As we can see, if we just try to spin up Firefox and, do a curl on ifconfig.me. So basically, what does the server for ifconfig.me see my IP as? As you can see, it's the same, API gateway, the HUDJ, whatever. If we do a curl, on it, each time it will see a different, IP. The catch would be that, Microsoft can see that it comes from AWS because it comes from AWS, ASN, unfortunately, unlike the threat actors who come from residential proxy. But essentially, we can do, IP rotation easily. As for other heuristics and other, checks, we use a long duration in between each spray to get past, the smart lockout timer that Microsoft doesn't disclose. 1 hour turns out to be good enough, usually for us. But for, very, clients that we anticipate to be very vigilant and very sophisticated, we do even, as slow as one round per day, but against hundreds of users while we do, other things in the background, of course. You're not, sort of waiting for the spray to finish while, sitting around sipping a pint, we scramble the user list as well. We, do user ABC in first round and ACB on second round and DBA on the third round. You get the idea. Some sort of jittering so that you don't, have a 10-second gap in between each, sort of attempt. All in all, just try to look as, not like a bot as possible, right? But the most important thing would be rotating IP and region. So it all sounds, very complicated so far, hey, Sunny. Do we have tools to do that, for us? So yes, there are a couple of tools that does that for us. Our own red team use team filtration for a lot of the other quality of life features that we want and we like. Though all of them I've checked, to be using Firefox or AWS Gateway for IP rotation. So, team filtration itself is written in C#. You can, read it. It's not very, long to get through source code. You can, implement your own as well. But anyway, let's go through team filtration for a bit. What is it, what it does, how to use it. Right. There's a enumeration module that validates users, emails that you found through Teams or, the Microsoft Online API. Basically, if you search for someone on Teams on the UI, you can see whether they are online or not, if, they allow external tenants. That's basically how team filtration does the, validation. But, the caveat is that service account that doesn't have Teams, you won't be able to validate it here, but you might use the MSOL Online feature to enumerate instead. The spray itself is a low and slow password spray, and the exfiltration bit looks for an MFA gap. You log in and loot everything you want and you need. So I'm not going deep into how to set it up. The author has a YouTube series. It's quite good. I recommend it, and also give credit to Flanvik. Very nice to be written here. Thank you. And, just very short on the spraying command. Of course, I could have put this up on the first slide and, some of you, the red teamers would take pictures and go away. But that's not the point, really. It's not about this tool itself, but it's about why this works, right? You can see, I've put the shuffle regions flag as red and bold because that's what gets past the smart protection the best. And we like to use slip minimal as 60 minutes. That means you try one round for all users, wait for an hour, and then wait and then go for another round, right? Jitter, you give a password list. Actually, the default passwords given by the tool itself is very good. It has the best, welcome at 2024 exclamation mark. That's one of the most common that he saw and what we see as well. Another caveat, other red teams definitely use, other tools and found, a lot of success as well. I'm very sure. Anyway, so what happens during a spray, right? For context, in our own engagements, we usually generate around 1K to 5K login requests, depending on, how good the organization is, of course, before we get a valid account. Valid as in, we can get past MFA and the credentials are valid, right? The math goes as such, like 8 business hour per day, 200 user per round-ish, 1 hour in between each round, that'd be 1.6 thousand requests per day. So it takes about 1 to 3 days to perform a dedicated password spray. So it's, in time wise, it's far more economical than an email campaign. But if you do it through, for a Teams-based sort of phishing campaign, it's similar, but, I like it because, I don't need to think of a pretext. It's viable. I want to stress to fit into many types of engagement windows, not just red teams. Even, in an external perimeter pen test, if the client, you feel has such a need, you can actually fit into that as well. And you can stop and restart the spray at any time. And, quality of life stuff, you can have, set up a API key for your, phone's push notification and, bing, you got a user. Nice. Time to, grab a coffee and exfil, run in the background while you hack and other stuff, so on and so forth. Right. So, a couple of more quick fire rounds of tips. The command only flag is very good. I've said that already, but said again. You could, or you should actually spin up your own testing M365 tenant, which is 1 month free before you use this tool or any, password spraying tool against a live client, because you don't want actually to, lock out your clients, for example, CEO or CISO in the process, because, locking out the wrong account, we know it's not, it is a big deal, and that's not the professionalism that the client expects of myself. At least I think so. Also check the user list with your client first. There might be some sort of like business critical, automation account that you found that they don't want you to try. Okay, fair enough. Also, there are Azure error messages. There's another thing that you can look into, like what the error code mean. It's very verbose. TrustedSec has a good blog post on this. Yep. Be very sure about what the tool does. Is C#. Read the source code first. But most important bit, ask for permission before starting a spray, because, lockouts, although are unlikely, you can't say, okay, Sunny at Cheltenham told me it's not gonna lock out anyone, right? I'm not gonna take responsibility for you. Good idea to spray during office hour only. So that the, IT person or SOC is online and can, raise alarms and talk to you, rather than middle of the night. Start with a small subset of user first. Confirm the list with the client. If, in our experience, we make the risk/value proposition clear, clients are usually quite okay with us, going for this, technique, because it does, shock them to find out, oh, you could potentially spray into my M365. Oh, go ahead, Sonny. Try it. I want to see you do it. Right. But anyway, the experienced red teamers in the audience might say, okay, it sounds all cool and fun, but how loud are, thousands of failed login requests? So it turns out, in an organization with, hundreds of users, they actually do see low thousands of failed login every day in the background. So that's one thing. But the region rotation would be the loud thing, actually. For example, if they only see users logging in from the UK, if there's anyone looking, one from Croatia, one from Vietnam, one from Brazil, that's, they would see, somebody's spraying them behind a proxy. But the problem is, what are they going to do about it? Of course, that raised their alertness level. That's true. But, as of, today, I see, the community not being very, popular about, the technique hasn't been popularized enough that I see it as an issue. And furthermore, actual threat actors using that. So I think we should test our SOCs whether they see it or not. And also, actually, alerting by default starts at a successful login that is defined by username password pair. And unsuccessful attempts are logged, but there's no default alerting. The SOC need to write some sort of custom detection to actually catch you. So we actually recommend using the credential as soon as you got them, before a password reset happens. or, a session revoke happens. What happens after a positive hit? So, this, from actual engagement, the tool would start enumerating through potential conditional access policy pairs. For example, like Microsoft to Windows on Teams, iPhone on Teams, Teams on iPhone, Teams on Android, Teams on Linux, and then to the next app, Outlook, with Windows, Outlook with iPhone, so on and so forth. Sometimes conditional access policy have gaps that, you could get through. For example, in this real engagement, we found that somehow iPhone can access, MS Teams without MFA, and then we got in, right? But for the another user we sprayed in the same engagement, the MFA is airtight, so we can see PowerShell through iPhone for some reason. Azure CL, iPhone, Linux, they all require MFA, right? So after exfiltration, after getting the credential, we go through exfiltration, and what you see on screen when we look back in our timestamp only took 9 minutes. We took 2,000 emails, all of the users' Teams chat log, and 200 megs of OneDrive files, which in essence already completed the action objective for that client for us, because their sensitive data is on SharePoint, so we proved that we could. But for other engagements, you might want to dig through the email, do something else, which I'll get to the next slide. You might want to get the session token you grab from the valid login to use it through some sort of post-exfiltration, post-exploitation framework, such as GraphRunner. It's a very good tool. I've seen some other red teams use as well. It leverages the Graph API to do things like enumerating for dynamic access, dynamic group rules, whether there are any groups that you can add yourselves to, invite your own malicious user, or register for a malicious, enterprise application, all sort of goodies. And I've also seen blue teams are starting to pick this up, write detection blocks as well. So it'll be interesting to look at the defense evasion bits on some of these very popular tooling in the coming months. So what are the limitations on, the password spraying, sort of approach? For example, there are indeed organizations that are very small. For example, my own company, if your client has less than 50 users, for example, then statistics is not on your side. Some sort of targeted social engineering campaign, or even, targeted phish might be a better approach. You might see a client with airtight setup through and through. No MFA gap. Everyone has strong password, or they even use passwordless, or maybe the SOC wrote custom detection and jump on you within 5 minutes. Right. Well, in that case, I'd say, it's good to tell a client they've done well when they have. It's a lot of work to set everything airtight. So I'll be very happy to write, a good job, well done on my report if it's the case. Although, after a lot of frustration, right. So, that's a bit on, M365 password spraying and a bit of, post-exploitation. I will give a bit of shill for a tool that I wrote. Azure, again, with the 3 H's, for, easy memorization. It's a one command, install of a vulnerable Azure environment. Has 5 flags so far. You provide your own tenant. Of course, don't put your proc stuff, production stuff on there. And you can learn how to hack Azure, or try out the password spraying stuff even. And there might be walkthroughs coming in our labs blog. Check it out. Give it a star if you like what you see. And then there will be time for credits before Q&A. Yep. Team Filtration, Fireprox, GraphRunner, all written by wonderful people, very great tools. Check out their stuff. And Q&A. Go ahead. I'll give you mine.
Hi, yeah. I've been monitoring Azure for some years and looking at logs, and I'm seeing persistent, there's an APT definitely that's persistently just banging away, so just as the attacks you've described there, that's, one password, well, it looks like one password, but many users. It's just been going on for years and years and years, and I don't know if you have any intel on, who the culprits might be.
Well, Unfortunately, I'm not a threat intel person, but a lot of threat groups that does that and tie to some sort of nation states that have a strategic interest in compromising this country and the West in general. I'm not going to name names, but you will see a lot of the names. For example, like Midnight Blizzard is a big one, but even our clients, they would get IPs from certain regions of the world that appears often. So if you monitor Azure logs, you certainly know. Yeah. Okay. The thing is, using residential proxy is more expensive, and it's quite troublesome to set up as a red team. But for example, the AWS API gateway, it's actually not designed for this. I'm sorry, you understand. It's designed for actual web APIs to be served to to be serving thousands of requests. So if you do even the low thousand sort of requests, that would only cost us like pennies. So that's the reason. Any more? So yes, MFA gap can be now I would classify them by two methods. The first one would be when you set up conditional access policies, you could actually add exclusions to cloud apps that would be allowed to log in without MFA, and that would be the type 1 MFA gap that I described on slide. And actually, if the attacker could get into one of the cloud apps, they could, if they have a refresh token, they could actually ask for access token for the other cloud apps as well. So that's the unfortunate part about Microsoft. The second MFA gap that I would describe would be the requirement not equals to enrollment gap, in which MFA is required for that user, but never set it up because that user is not there anymore. So you could get into it and set up as your own. And yeah. Yes. Yeah, for example, like in the previous slide that I've shown, you can see MS Teams on iPhone doesn't require MFA, for example, here. But we use that access token to log into further like Teams, to Outlook, to SharePoint, to all the popular M365 applications. Yeah. Yeah. Thank you all. If that's okay. Yeah, go ahead. I would say the biggest thing that I would say and I would see is the requirement equals enrollment understanding gap. And that's a sort of not that hard to fix in my mind. If you tell them, okay, just that the user needs MFA doesn't mean they have, and you need to sort of like phase out your stale user that hasn't logged in for a while. Then and that's a easier thing to get through to them. And it's sort of like commonly seen as well. I do have a question for you as well, as a contact on Microsoft, right? Or ex Microsoft, I'm not sure. So if the user were to, find in remediation, we tell them to look for the MFA gap and then fix that. What would be a good approach to undergo a organization-wide audit on an MFA gap by excluding some sort of cloud apps? For example, would you advise them to use some sort of workbook, or would you like tell them to click through the continuous access policies and remove the exclusion? Yeah. I- yeah. Yeah. Yeah, thank you. It's actually very reassuring to me to know that it's actually indeed a very hard problem to solve. As I would think it's a very hard problem to solve, and there's no easy remediation. And that's why also I bring this talk to more than one place, because I think more people needs to be talking about this. Is all. Thank you. Thank you very much.